Hello there and welcome to episode 3 of Cricket Scorers Untallied. My name is Julia Farman and with me today I have Sue Drinkwater.
Hello.
And I have Brian Rodwell.
Hello.
I hope everyone's been keeping all safe and well during these times. It's good to see that people are starting to listen to our podcast. We're truly going international with scorers listening from as far away as New Zealand. We've got Bermuda, we've got France, we've got a bit of a stronghold in Blackheath and Islington. Not quite a foreign country, but when you're in the UK, this is about as far as we can get at the moment. And interestingly, we've got Israel as well.
So, Jules, how did the dice game go last week?
There's a story. Now, Zoom stopped play. So there was a massive outage last week on Zoom. And it happened, I think, just after we recorded the episode 2 of this podcast. So there I was, all set up. I put a picture out on Twitter, all ready to go with scoring materials. First game of the season, ready to score. And then they couldn't get all the technology working. But they have now, Zoom's back on, and the game will be rescheduled. So yeah, not rain stop play, but Zoom stop play.
Wow.
So Sue, I see you're wearing a very interesting shirt there. Let's have a look.
Fantastic.
So what shirt is that?
This is my Vanuatu shirt. So I'm wearing this in honour of the fact that I scored for them first 12 years ago today. I was sitting in Jersey, scoring for them in a match against Germany, and a 50 over game. So I was out there for an ICC tournament, out there for 10 days, which was very nice. 10 days in Jersey. And it was called the World Cricket League, and I'd never heard of that before I was asked to go out there. But it's basically the early stages of the World Cup, and countries who want to qualify for the World Cup play in these early stages, and then the top 2 get to join in with all the nations that we normally think of as cricket playing nations, the Englands and the Australias and the New Zealands. They get to join in them as participants in the World Cup.
Oh, fantastic. So what sort of ICC division would the teams have been in at the time? Can you remember?
Yes, that was the very first one, and it was Division 5. However, it expanded rapidly after a couple of years, and I went back 2 years later to Guernsey, and I was doing Division 8 then. But that was the beginning. That was the bottom division, and it was Division 5. So as well as Vanuatu and Jersey, I can't remember all the teams, but there were certainly Germany, Nepal, Mozambique, Bahamas, USA, and Afghanistan. So definitely those ones.
The mighty Afghanistan. Is that the one that are used in for Out the Ashes, the documentary?
It is, because it was their sort of beginning of the trail, and they were tipped to go through and do well, which they did. They've gone through and they are now playing in the World Cup. So yeah, that was their very beginning, and they had film cameras there with them, making the documentary as they went around.
It's one of the best sort of cricket documentaries I've seen in recent times, just sort of explaining a little bit from a country where it's come from and its rise in cricket. There's some amazing stat that Nabi has played cricket against 50 different cricket playing nations that are recognised by the ICC. And that, I think he's one of the only few players to do so, because he's just gone up through the ranks.
So, Jules, you're wearing an Afghanistan shirt, so you must be an Afghanistan supporter then.
Yeah, very much so. I coached some Afghan lads in South Croydon way, and just I think from where they've come from and their rise has just been phenomenal. But it's also been a good way of bringing sort of people together, not just within Afghanistan itself, but also sort of around the world as people have been displaced, and sort of cricket always sort of brings them together, especially amongst the Pashtun community as well. And they're great fun to watch. Because it's completely unorthodox cricket that you're watching, but they just love the game, and the fans are just insane. It was great fun. I think they played England last year in a warm-up game at the Oval, and I think majority of the crowd there are Afghans. I mean, just for people to see their heroes and see the Afghan players play was something else. So, no, it's good. It's also interesting that Nepal were part of that setup as well, because there's quite a lot of work going on with Nepal at the moment, with the MCC doing a lot of support with their cricket. So it's interesting that they were also in that competition as well. How did it? Can you remember how they did at all?
I don't remember how Nepal did because I didn't score for them. And we were allocated a team each, and we stayed with the team throughout the competition. So I stuck largely with Vanuatu.
Fantastic.
And one of the Jersey scorers, I think it was Drew Livingston, was the Nepal scorer. But one of the Nepal players took 10 wickets in a game, and I wrote out the scorecard for him in the evening so that it was a box style scorebook. I wrote out the whole score sheet that had his 10 wickets in so that he could take it home, because otherwise he wouldn't have had a record of it.
Fantastic.
It's amazing.
No, I was going to say, can you remember, Sue, whether the Vanuatu team, was it full of local players or was it resettled other nationalities?
No, the Vanuatu team were Vanuatuans, so they were locals, but many of the other sides were not. So Afghan, I think, were locals as well, largely.
Yes.
But you look at the German side, for one, I know that they weren't. They were largely from other nations.
They did back then have a strong sort of Pakistan stronghold within their team. It's interesting because the German female cricket team are predominantly German, and I think some of their players have gone into cricket because they were fostering or looking after Afghan or Pakistan lads in Germany, and that's how they learned cricket. And some of them have gone into cricket that way. Because I did a tournament over in Belgium a couple of years back, whereas conversely over in Italy, the team there, don't get me wrong, there are a few Italians in it, but the majority of them are Sri Lankan.
Yeah.
Which is, or background is Sri Lankan. So it's really quite interesting, actually, sort of how some of the teams like Brian has picked up are made up of.
Yeah. I met a couple of German players, actually German women players, last year who were over here on a tutor course that I was running for ECBACO, and you're right. So they are German girls playing for the German national side, and now they're trying to train other scorers in Germany. Two lovely girls, actually, Meda and Verena.
Yeah, they really are a nice bunch, and I think Belgium have got sort of a mixture of people, sort of Belgians, but also expats and sort of various people. So it's nice to see sort of the growth of cricket, sort of both in countries that have not played it before, have a background in it, but also seeing both men and women play. It's quite a good fun game going through the ICC list and sort of guessing which countries are ICC countries. I found out recently that Mali is now a recognised ICC cricket country, which is... Oh, wow. Yes, which is going to be quite new.
Well, I'm wearing a shirt which is not quite as exotic as Vanuatu or Afghanistan. It is an old England T20 shirt, which I think was one of the original ones that they wore in the first World Cup. I understand this week, Sue, you've been speaking to people who have been scoring blind and visually impaired cricket, both at regional and national level.
Yes, I've done an interview with Paul Topliss and Mark Wiltshire that we'll listen to now. We'd like to welcome to Cricket Scorers Untallied two people who score visually impaired and blind cricket. We have Paul Topliss, who is head of the scorers panel for visually impaired and blind cricket, and Mark Wiltshire, who normally scores league cricket for Hatherley and Reading second 11, but also scores some visually impaired and blind cricket games in the Gloucestershire and Somerset region. So welcome to you both. Hello, Paul. Hello, Mark.
Good afternoon, Sue.
Hi, Sue.
So we'll start with you, Paul. Could you just give us an explanation about what visually impaired and blind cricket is, some of the differences, and how you go about scoring it, please?
Okay, so blind cricket has been around for a very long time in various different forms. The British Blind Sport Cup, I think, is one of the longest running disability sports competitions worldwide. And cricket for the blind is quite a different sport depending whether you're playing a domestic game in the UK or an international game in the UK. So if you don't mind, I'll explain both games.
Oh, yes, please.
So in the UK, the game pretty much looks like regular cricket, except for the fact that the players use a size 3 football with some ball bearings inside so that it makes a noise. So the size is partly so that those with low vision have got a better chance of seeing a bigger thing. The noise means that those who can't see at all can hear the ball. And that's crucial. So being able to hear is very important for all visually impaired sports. But that ball is bowled traditionally overarm in exactly the same way as you would bowl a cricket ball, or most of the time it is. And a lot of people who are totally blind will tend to bowl just from a standing position, not taking any run-up. Right. Now, to give a chance of people being able to hit the ball, this is kind of quite demanding for umpires. Depending on the sight category of the batsman, depends on how many times the ball has to bounce before it reaches the popping crease. So players with very low vision, the ball has to bounce twice before it reaches them. Otherwise, it's a no ball. And to let you know it's coming at all, at the start of the game, it's a sort of almost more gentlemanly than cricket game, because the bowler has to say, "Batsman, are you ready?" Batsman then says, "Yes, I'm ready." And on release, the bowler has to say, "Play," and to say it at the moment of release, and not too late and not too early, and not string it out and try going play to disguise any sound the ball might be making, and effectively make it harder for the batsman. If you're totally blind, you can catch the ball on the bounce. The other difference from the normal game, which is the key difference for scorers, is that anybody who's totally blind runs off the bat count double. So if you haven't quite seen whether it's come off the bat or their leg, it's more important to look out for the leg by symbol. If it's a leg by and they've run one, that's one. If they've touched it with the bat and they've run one, the score advances by 2. So you just have to kind of get used to that.
Quite complex for the scorers.
So one of my most enjoyable experiences with cricket for the blind and visually impaired was scoring the international game for England, and they played one game at the Oval. There were 2 of us scoring there, and we had a scoreboard operator, and we were just dead chuffed when one of the England guys got a 12. The scoreboard operators had more difficulty with that. They had a whizzy new fantastic electronic scoreboard, and they were going, "How do we do 12 on one ball? Because it's a 6 doubled." Now, the international game is a slightly different game. It's played with a standard size cricket ball in hard white plastic with ball bearings on to give it a sound. And the ball is bowled underarm. It's slightly more demanding for the umpires because the ball has to pitch in each half of the 22 yards. It means that batting in the international game, unless you've got very good sight, it's difficult to drive the ball because generally the ball doesn't bounce up that far. A lot of people struggle to get the ball to bounce much at all, and it will often end up rolling. So batsmen will tend to be low, crouching on the floor, gloves on the floor, playing cross-bat shots, sweeps and reverse sweeps and dabs. If you're totally blind and the ball bounces too high, in the international game, there's also and it bounces too high and goes well over, and you bowl a totally blind batsman, your celebrations are cut short because everybody reminds you that too high is not a wicket, it's actually a no ball.
Wow.
But if it hits, the umpire has to decide whether it's hit low enough to be out or high enough to be a no ball for a totally blind batsman.
Can I ask how you can identify what level of impairment a player has? You've talked about people with different levels of impairment, and then maybe some get double runs and others don't. How would I know that as a scorer?
As a scorer, really the only people you need to be able to see are the totally blind players, because for a scorer, they're the only ones where there's a real difference for you. It's harder for the umpires. They need to identify various different people. Everybody wears an armband, though. So, and the armband dictates your sight category. Although I say to scorers, in order to be absolutely sure there's no cheating, most totally blind players also have to wear blackout shades. But I always say to scorers, look, it's much easier to look out for the blackout shades than it is to see whether somebody's got a purple armband on instead of a yellow one or a green one.
Right. So, Mark, have you had problems when you've scored trying to identify which are the completely blind players?
Very, very luckily, the first game I did was down in Somerset. I had two really good umpires who basically talked through the whole game. So they were telling me what was going on. Oh, so they said,
on walkie-talkies.
Total. So walkie-talkie, it was John Wheeler and Yvonne Dolphin Cooper.
Oh, yes.
So very, very good. And they basically got me through it because as you just had a very, very quick resume from Paul, it's quite complicated.
Sounds it.
And I read the rules and the regs and the laws and thought, the only way to do this really is to go into the deep end and learn it as I'm going along. And I did. Yeah, it is completely different. I think the thing I found the most difficult was the noise, because the people can't see so well. They're asking other people. They're asking you as the scorer. And on a Saturday afternoon, you're telling people go away, look at the scoreboard. You've obviously got to be a bit more in touch with where you are and your surroundings with people. But no, it's really, really enjoyable.
It sounds it, but very, very complicated by the sound of it. Paul, can you tell us more about the scoring side of it, please?
There are a lot of very good umpires around for the game. And actually, it's important for them to do that talking, not for the scorers, but as much for the batsmen as well, and the other players. The player's vision is poor. So it's much better if the umpire kind of calls out 1 run, 2 scored, just to remind them that one of the totals was on strike. And they've run 1, and everybody knows kind of what's going on. And just to kind of communicate, because we forget, I think, how much we pick up when we can see. And so you do have to kind of be compensating for that when dealing with making sure it's accessible completely to as many people with visual impairment as possible. So I think the key things for scoring, and I came to scoring for visually impaired cricket because the youngest of our 4 adopted children is visually impaired. And he'd done various sports and then he started playing cricket. And as he started playing cricket, I realized that actually there was a need for support. There's a bare handful of people with really good sight who might somehow struggle to manage scoring in any format just because their vision isn't really good enough to be able to do all the things that you need to do as a scorer, to watch for the signals, the activity, and do the record keeping. You really do need to be able to, to see. So players can't cover in the visually impaired game. So I would say the kind of tough things are like, I think it doesn't matter what system you're using, although if you use electronic scoring, this does go away slightly. And so Play Cricket, I think, would be great for this. Which I'm now starting to use. But you can get a lot of wides, which means that actually you can kind of run out of space. Yeah. You certainly can easily run out of space. Mark, your colleague Ray, who scores for Gloucestershire, she always uses 2 boxes for an over, generally, for scoring the blind and visually impaired game, to give herself room to get all the balls in. And she knows that bowlers can't bowl that many overs, so there'll always be room to get everybody's overs in, even spreading them out like that. So it's like an intelligent adaptation, because otherwise, if you're trying to kind of cram them all in, and you're up to ball 11 and 12 and 13, yes, it can be a real difficulty. I suspect that might slightly be awkward, even if you're using a linear sheet, or you'd have to work out how to sort your linear sheet out. There were over 50 wides in a Yorkshire game a couple of seasons ago. So even on linear, I think you'd have been certainly spread over several lines, and I think you'd have been starting to kind of give up working out how you'd got your over recorded, I think, with that many wides. But generally, lots of wides is difficult. I haven't found a box-style book which has ever really had enough space for all the wides in a game in it. It's always like, oh, okay, we hardly get any leg buys. They'll all go in the leg buys thing as well, and then I'll have to squeeze the leg buys on the end of the buys or something, or somehow to kind of make it fit on almost any book. You just got to kind of keep your eye on going, yeah, I know that's who's on strike, and that's who I'm kind of recording that, the runs against, and not allow yourself to be distracted by the fact that, 2 means it should be the same batsman still on strike, as opposed to them having kind of swapped round.
But that's much harder with electronic scoring, where the right batsman effectively is put on strike, which might not be the right batsman in these circumstances.
And it's one of the reasons why I think the current version of Play Cricket actually is quite good, because it's so easy to change the striker. I had seen people trying to use previous electronic scoring systems for blind and visually impaired cricket, and found them having angst with having to kind of find a way to switch the batsman when that kind of happened, which is why for the last couple of seasons I've been scoring with my own Excel spreadsheet, which dealt with that swapping batsman's ends thing perfectly well, because I'd created it deliberately to do that. But I do understand that Play Cricket are working on getting Play Cricket to work for the visually impaired game. So I'm looking forward to that when it happens. And it will make life easy for everybody.
Well, let's hope. It sounds like a complex thing that they've got to work on, though. So, yeah. Mark, what did you use when you scored these games?
The first 3 games I did it in the box style. And I did have to do the first game. I think the first over one chap bowled went for 17 wides. So it went over 2 boxes automatically. So straight from there, I just used 2 boxes. But Paul very kindly asked me if I'd help him do the BBS Cup final at the County Ground last year. And while he was doing his own, to me, quite technical system of scoring, I actually did it on Play Cricket. I set a game up locally, and it was fine, except, as Paul said, if the total scores are 1, you've got to swap your batsman. Yeah. And then it underlines it for you, so you know that he's in theory at the wrong end for real cricket, for league cricket. But so I haven't yet done a linear sheet. I'm not confident enough to that. I think, but I've kept it going, and it's relatively neat.
Good.
It's not quite as neat as it's just very, very different. The concentration level is quite, but once you get into it, you get into a routine. So you set yourself a routine, and you just do it, and you just work. Do what works for you. And when I was scoring with Paul, it was even easier because there was 2 of us and we could converse each pool. And Paul's far more experienced than I am, so it's great having someone else there. It's
ideal to have 2 scorers really for any game and whatever is going on. And because if you're on your own, it's always tough. Whatever you're doing, whatever system you're using.
Yeah.
My view would be electronic scoring is definitely the way to go if you're likely to be on your own, provided you can kind of rely on it.
You've mentioned only having 1 scorer in a game, which in a normal game is difficult enough. I can't imagine going into one of these games with only 1 scorer, but is that a regular feature then?
Yes, that's sort of limitation on funds for blind cricket in England and Wales. And that's because it's really difficult to run the game without 2 umpires. The umpires will tell you that this game, there's far less opportunity to switch off when you're standing at square leg.
But it's a shame, though, that you might have to forego a scorer, because you would want 2 umpires and 2 scorers.
Ideally, you would have a team of 4, yes. So we do get some 4s, but usually, fairly occasionally, a little bit more. I'm increasingly trying to make sure that for the side that I score for, Metro, who have kind of 2 teams, I do as many home and away games as possible. Certainly, it's particularly tough, as it would have been for Mark's first game, if you go on your own and you don't really know any of the players, because those games can have winning and losing draws, as well as wins, draws, and a draw. And I think on the last ball, we may have been in the position where there were certainly 3, maybe 4, and maybe all 5 kind of result options possible on the final ball. So you did want to be reasonably confident that the score was right at that point.
Good Lord, I'm in awe of the people who are scoring this type of cricket. I really am. Paul, how often are these games played? You talk about the regional games. How often are there regional games?
Domestically, there's around 90 blind cricket kind of matches over the summer up and down the country. So there's cricket on most weekends. Usually, if there's not any cricket on, it's probably because there's an England training weekend. There's an England team who've been playing blind cricket for a long time. There's also a UK women's blind 11 who have been together now for about 8 years, perhaps.
Very interesting. So, Mark, could you give some advice if there's anybody out there who's thinking that this sounds really interesting and that they might like to have a go? As somebody who has dabbled in both sort of forms of cricket, do you have any advice for these people?
I would certainly, if I was to do it again, go and look at a game, observe as a neutral.
Right.
If you could do it next to the scorer, do it next to the scorer, just to see roughly what goes on. Get there nice and early.
Yeah.
Get yourself prepared, and try and be as relaxed as you can.
Okay. And what games have you scored? Who have you scored for up to now in this format of cricket?
I've done 2 games for the Somerset VICC, a Gloucestershire Growlers game, and I did the BBS Cup final for Paul at the county ground last year.
So that's Bristol.
Between London Metro Devils and
Metro, not Metro Devils.
Yeah,
Metro Devils are the second. Metro Devils are Metro's second side, and that was against Somerset. And I invited you because you had scored for Somerset, and they don't have a regular scorer, unfortunately. I think familiarity with the game helps no end. Simon, who scores for Kent, I think was familiar with the game because almost all of his family play. If the Bouldings are on holiday, Kent can be scratching for a side. Simon scored 1 game alongside me, having not scored any cricket before, and he was then on his own. His scorecards are, they're always kind of spot on. I mean, Simon's one of those people who, you can kind of trust that his scorecard will be right. I think he has the kind of right attitude for a kind of scorer. But if you do have the scorer's attitude, I think you can pick this game up. I mean, the other thing I would say, I hope you agree, Mark, is that it's always fantastic. There's a great deal of appreciation and thanks for what you do. The players almost all come across and kind of say thank you.
Definitely.
Blind cricket recognise the contribution that people make. So they recognise that the scorers and the umpires are kind of important for games. So Mark, you've got a BBS Cup final scorers trophy, I think, haven't you?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, excellent.
So any competition or kind of final, there's always a memento for scorers as well as umpires. In that we are recognised as being an important part of the team.
Oh, well, I'm glad to hear that after all of the work that you've just told us that scorers do.
One thing Paul didn't say was about the LBW for a total. They get 2 lives.
Oh, do they?
Yes, total in domestic cricket, totals get 2 lives.
Yeah.
So it's a dot ball, and you perhaps make a note that at 7.4 there's a kind of half out, and the bowler who gets the second LBW, if that's how that batsman's dismissed, gets the kind of credit.
Dismissal.
The person who gets the first half, well, if somebody's if somebody's diligent on their scorecard, they'll get the kind of credit for the first half of the LBW, but it won't go in their figures. In the figures, it's the second bowler gets the wicket, because you don't get a half a bowling wicket.
It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you both, and I've learned about a whole format of cricket that I really knew nothing about before, so thank you both very much. If there are any listeners out there who do fancy having a go at scoring blind cricket, then do please get in touch via the Cricket Scorers Untallied email address or via our Twitter account, and we will put you in touch with Paul so that when cricket is being played again, maybe you'll get an opportunity to do this too. So thank you both very much.
I don't like cricket. Oh no. I love it.
Thank you for that, Sue. That was very interesting. Now, on to the question that we posed last week, which was, how would you score differently a retired batsman who had retired through injury, or a batsman that had retired through deciding not to continue his innings, maybe in a pre-season friendly, where he had decided to give another batsman an opportunity? Jules, do you want to take that up?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to talk about the box book because that's all I know the best. If I've got a player that comes off the pitch and he's retired not out at that stage, not retired hurt, if he's retired not out, I would do a very thin pencil line against the batter part in the box book, because what I have a tendency to do is have a daft moment and still carry on scoring when the new batter is in. So I would do a very thin pencil line, so I just know that that person has stopped. I would, on that ball that's bowled by the bowler, whatever has happened, I would do a little X1 next to it, and in the notes box that you have on most score sheets, or even at the side of the book, even if you don't have the notes bit, I would put what had happened at that point. But I think the biggest thing for me is in the fall of wicket column is, say for example it was the second wicket, I wouldn't record it as a wicket being taken because it's not a wicket being taken, but I would divide the box in half and put down what the score was at that point, what the batter retiring was on at that point, and how many balls he'd face or she'd face. The batter that's still in at the other end, I would do exactly the same thing, note down the partnership and the time. And then when the new batter comes in to replace the not out batter, I'd fill that in, but then when the next wicket fell, I would actually write that in ink on the fall of the second wicket. And then I would be able to know how much that partnership was. If it was a retired and completely out, I have to say, and this may just be my experience, it's very rare that if a retired and completely out, it's actually said at the time. But so that's always been a little bit of a party for us to try and sort out afterwards and sort out the book.
I agree.
And so I would then, where I had that pencil line over box 2, I would actually then ink over it and then sort of just adjust my fall of wicket. I'm trying to think, the best way to say numbers of batters that are the fall of wicket. So I would do that in that scenario. And obviously put what the score is against the total number against the batter at the top. If the batter had retired but then came back in again, what I would then do is, because I haven't put the total number of runs scored at the end of the batter column, I would then continue to carry on scoring after that thin pencil line. And then I'd have to sit there and probably after the match with a cup of tea work out how many minutes he was at the crease, because I always struggle doing minutes for batters at the crease, and then do the total number of balls faced, because that's not going to change no matter what time he's come in, and then the total runs at the end. So that was quite a long-winded explanation of how I do it in the box score sheet. Sorry, guys. If you're still with us after that point, it's to your credit. Well done.
Thanks, Jules.
Shall I give you a simpler answer if you're using some computer software? Because you can see that actually it's quite complex to do. And as Jules has explained, if you're using the box style book, it's really quite complex, and there are a lot of entries that you've got to make. If you're using Play Cricket Scorer Pro, which is the laptop version, it's really easy to do. There's a wicket button over on the left-hand side. It's a big red button that has wicket written in the middle of it. And it has a down arrow by the side of it. And instead of clicking on the wicket button, if you click the down arrow, then you will get a small menu, and retirement is on that menu. And you can then just select which of the two batsmen are out, because if somebody's injured or ill, it could be either batsman. So you select which batsman is out, and you select whether they are retired out or not out. And it is as simple as that. And then the software deals with everything else. And if the batsman is retired not out, then their name appears on the drop-down menu for incoming batsmen at future wickets. So that if another wicket falls later on or another retirement, you can choose a batsman that had retired not out before, and they can come back in. And the software deals with all the minutes and everything for you, which is marvellous. And it puts a note in the innings notes, and it does everything that Jules has described. Really, it does it all for you. So it's a simple selection off a menu. Now, I've just been having a look at the PCS app. So that's an app that runs on your phone or a tablet. And I've just been looking to see how you do it on that. And there's a wicket button on there. And if you choose wicket, then retired is under dismissal type, which I was a bit alarmed about, because I thought, well, where's retired not out then? But once you select retired as the dismissal type and click on done, then you get a little menu that pops up that says, is this person retired out or not out? So you do get to choose, but not till the very end. So it's just a little off-putting. For anybody using the app, do follow it through as though it's a wicket. But if they're retired not out, then clearly it won't add one to the wickets. Sadly, also on this menu, as well as the cancel button, if you want to change your mind, they have retired hurt, which you see in the media and does not exist in the laws of cricket. So I'm a little upset to see that on the menu.
Absolutely.
So, Brian, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. In a linear book, it would be even simpler, really, because you would just rule off the batsman whether he was retired out or not out. You would put a note in the box, and depending on what happened, whether you would choose to increment the wickets or not. It's actually quite simple to sort out, hopefully.
Excellent.
So I've got a question for this week's one, and it's one that I quite often struggle with, especially as you get to see some amazing fielding on the boundary where they save a 4 and the ball gets thrown in, and then the batter has not made their crease, and the wicketkeeper or a player that's near to the stumps actually breaks the stumps and the run out happens. So who do you actually attribute for doing the run out? Is it the person that's right next to the stumps who's able to break and take the bails off, or is it the person that does that amazing throwing from the boundary? So I'd like to know what you scorers do for that. And please feel free between now and next week, when the next podcast is recorded, to also put on Twitter what you would do in that scenario, because I think it would be interesting to hear from our listeners about how they would record that. Do follow us on Cricket Scorers 1 on Twitter. It's lovely to see that we've got this broad range of listenership, so do put in the countries that you're listening from, or else the flag, and we can play some amazing guessing game of where you're listening from around the world.
Absolutely. We're very intrigued to find out who our Israeli listeners are and our Bermudan listeners are.
Excellent. Excellent.
So as we will hopefully look at our Twitter feed to see where you're all coming from around the world, don't forget you can also do #AskTheScorer. If you've got any scoring questions that you want to ask, please feel free to get in contact with us. We also have an email address as well at cricketscorersuntallied@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at @cricketscorers1, or you can just go into your search and do Cricket Scorers Untallied, and we're happy to answer any of your questions, and please put down where in the world you're listening from. So that's it for episode 3. We'll be back with you next week. So it's a goodbye from Brian.
Goodbye.
It's a goodbye from Sue.
Goodbye.
And it's a goodbye from me. I'll see you all next week.